I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. My old buddy, Greg Mannarino, we talk on the phone 4 or 5 times a week. And one of the things he's been talking about, and really nobody else has been covering this, is the blackout, the media blackout of what's going on in emerging markets. Man, I saw something on Bloomberg overnight in the European office about, this past week about the Turkish lira and them raising interest rates to 23%. They don't know if that's going to do it. But the guy has been all over this and this media blackout and why he thinks they're blacking this out and why this is so important is Gregory Mannarino of TradersChoice.net. Gregory Mannarino, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Great to be here, Greg. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
What's up with this? You're calling it because you live, eat, and breathe the markets, and you suck up all the information you can on the internet, on CNBC, you watch more hours of CNBC and Fox Business than anybody I know. And you're saying, hey, Zippo, they're giving hardly anything on this, and this is a big deal. Why are they giving the blackout, and why is this a big deal?
Greg, it's so big, and this is something you and I and a lot of guys have been talking about for a very, very long time. Look, let me put the most simple perspective that I possibly can on what's happening around the world. This is not just the United States, because, again, people here in our country, they're not being allowed, this is the truth, to see what goes on or what is going on outside of the United States. The mainstream media outlets are doing everything they possibly can to keep people misinformed and uninformed. So this is what's happening here on a global scale. The world right now, Greg, is overdosing on debt. I cannot stress that enough. So what we're witnessing here with regard to the emerging markets is a currency meltdown. Now, what I want people to understand, let's define what currency is. These are debt units, fiat currency, money by government decree. That's all it is. So we are in an environment where world central banks colluding with their respective leaders, honestly, they have no choice because the party ended in 2008 on a global scale, have done all they can to reinflate bubbles by, again, introducing debt on every single living soul on this planet, unlike we have ever seen in the history of the world. So you and I have spoken about many, many times how when this whole thing starts to hit a point of maximum saturation, that's what I like to call it, we were going to see cracks or the debt market start to let go before everything else. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. The currency meltdown in the emerging markets, these are units of debt. The currency, these are unbacked liabilities being dispersed by bankrupt governments. The same thing here in the United States of America, where our debt to GDP ratio is now over 100%. It's a big problem. But again, world leaders are really backed into a corner here. And they, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but they have no choice but to do what they're doing now in many ways here, to keep the pedal to the floor, because again, it all comes down to keeping the world awash in debt, because that's the way the system functions. It's debt-based. People don't understand this. It drives me out of my mind when you say we have a debt-based economic model. A debt-based economic model is very simple to understand. It demands that debt be borrowed into existence in greater and greater amounts just to sustain the current environment. That's why debts everywhere around the world and deficits are going to continue to explode. We just found out that right here in the United States, our budget deficit doubled in 1 year. And this is a phenomenon that is going on everywhere. So the media has to be very careful with the information that they're letting out, because there are some people, and I'm sure that these are your followers, that understand that the system the system's ever more dependence upon the acquisition of debt in perpetuity is starting to rear its ugly head. Greg, you and I explained to you, we spoke about this, that last time in 2008, we bailed out the banks. This time, we're going to have to bail out countries. And who's going to suffer? Who is suffering, Greg? The people are. We keep hearing about some type of a boom or a recovery all over the world, not just here in the United States. Meanwhile, it's starting in the emerging markets. Their currencies are starting to melt down, which is a reflection of their economies. Okay, now there's a lot of talk out here, and it's not just Greg Mannarino. This is even making it to the mainstream, Greg. Bloomberg put out an article, I believe it was last week, where they were speaking about how worries are of a contagion. Again, it's a crisis of the currency that we're seeing in the emerging markets. It's going to, at one point, don't know when, there's no way to speculate anymore because world central banks are very crafty. What they're doing behind the scenes, in front of our faces, is being ignored. But there's going to be a moment here of reckoning where every single thing is going to correct to fair value. People talk about it as it's going to be a collapse or a reset. What it really is a simple correction to fair value. The markets around the world, the stock markets around the world, have zero bearing on reality. It's kind of like the music stopped, but the people are still dancing. And it's going to become real at one time. And how do we know that? Because we've seen it, Greg, over and over and over again. You got here in the United States consumer debt hitting a new record high week after week after week. People are in some type of a delusionary state that they believe that the party is not going to end. It's the illusion, Greg, that you and I speak about all the time. The stock market continuing to march higher, home values inflating. People are getting very complacent. So what they're doing is they're borrowing more and borrowing more, thinking that this whole thing is real. The environment we are in is not real, and it will correct to fair value. So what's going to end up happening, unfortunately, all of this will correct to a fair value. And people out there that are burying themselves in debt beyond their eyeballs, again, week after week, more debt, consumer debt, all-time record high week after week, they're going to be stuck holding all this debt as the real value of their investments and home is realized. Does this sound familiar? Because this is what happened last time in 2008, and it's going to be much, much worse this time. Now, don't listen to Greg Mannarino here. How about we listen to someone like Ray Dalio, guy here who started the largest hedge fund on earth. He put out a warning just a couple of days ago telling people to be prepared. Be prepared for a meltdown worse than 2008. He also went on to say he expects to see social unrest right here in the United States like we have never seen before. Who does that sound like? Anyone here that follows my work? That's all I've been trying to explain to people for years. We're seeing it, Greg, and perhaps the opening salvos are now going off here with the emerging market currencies, currency, unit of debt, debt market, which is starting to become real. It's unfortunate what's happening.
Let's play a little word association. And I'm just going to give you a country name and just tell me what the first thing pops in your head. Turkey.
Currency meltdown, emerging markets. Again, and then, let me clarify real quick because I hate.
Okay.
Go ahead. All right, go ahead.
Argentina.
Same thing. Currency meltdown. People right now, they're rationing food. You're not hearing this on any of the mainstream outlets.
Venezuela.
Oh, God. People are eating the farm animals, literally going to the zoos. I'm sorry, zoo animals. They're going to the zoo to eat animals and dead cats and rats or whatever they can find. It's terrible.
Brazil.
Same thing, Greg. Again. I'm sure that we can keep throwing these things out here. South Africa. I mean,
Iran.
It's everywhere.
How about Iran?
Iran. You know, I think that's part of the whole thing. That look, what's really happening here, Greg, in my opinion, is if we want to talk about countries like Iran and everything, and what may be going on.
Their inflation rate is it's skyrocketing.
It's skyrocketing. But what I was trying to lead up to here is. I hate to sit here and say this, Greg, but I really think that the world is preparing for war. And part of this is these, and I'm not saying that we don't need to fix it, Greg, but these these trade wars here, which are getting worse, no end in sight. I explain this to everyone here. It's all putting the world on a war footing. And who's going to suffer here? The people. They always do. It's the middle class that pays for everything since time immemorial. And it's not going to stop now, unfortunately. I think we're seeing, Greg, and I would believe you would agree, and probably most of your listeners, a convergence of many things, economic and otherwise, that are leading us to that pinnacle again, where we are going to face down another war, which is going to be propagated deliberately to again keep the money or the cash flowing to the 1%. It's always the same story. It's never ever will change. Doesn't matter who sits in the pretty White House or in any other pretty building around the world. It's an unfortunate thing, but people need to start waking up that despite the fact that the stock market here is very close to all-time record highs and will probably continue higher. And I've been outlining this for people, Greg, on your show when President Trump was elected. What did I say to you? I said, this is a game changer.
Yep,
remember?
Exactly. So things are going to go up.
Things are going to go up. And it was very simple to understand why that would happen. Did I expect certain things to be a little different? Of course I did, but that's always the way it is, that's life. But again, what we're witnessing here is a simple equation. We have stock market at all-time record highs, corporations here that have never gotten so wealthy in such a short period of time, where the American people are in more debt than they've ever been. And this is, again, a thing that's going on. It's going on around the world. It's a global phenomenon.
Do we get to a point where countries pull a Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico had $74 billion in debt and said, listen, we can pick up the trash and keep the lights on, or we can screw bondholders. Sorry, bondholders, we're not paying you. Is that what's going to happen with, they have an IMF deal that they're trying to get a loan to Argentina. That's just to pay bondholders. What happens if IMF says, we're done. We're not paying it. How about Turkey? We're not paying it. Iran, not paying it. Brazil, nope. Venezuela, forget it. You're not loaning us any money anyway. We'll use Bitcoin if we can. Are we coming into a situation where countries, before we get this big war, are just going to say, we're not paying. We're done. You made a bad investment. We're not paying our debt. Is that going to happen first? A giant global default?
Well, one way or the other, it's going to happen. This, again, that point of maximum saturation here where we cannot borrow anymore. Greg, this is an ongoing crime. We are robbing from future generations, children that have not been born yet, to just sustain our environment. This is the nature of the debt-based economic model. There is a point where we can't borrow anymore. Well, it's not a matter of even saying we're not going to pay it back. Well, it just can't be done anymore. And we're seeing it again in the reflection of the currency around the world.
I think we're already there, aren't we? I mean, they're not ever intending to pay this back. We went from, and I'm just with you, I just kind of talk like we're talking on the phone. I mean, we went from 160 or 70 trillion dollar, very well documented number. Nomi Prinz in her collusion book, best-selling author, and other people have documented this. We grew from 160, 70 trillion in global debt to about almost 250 trillion dollars. We couldn't pay it back before. No. We're not going to pay it back now. So what are we getting to? Are we getting to a reset? People talk about the reset. What's the reset look like? The reset is going to be the washout of debt. Am I wrong? The currencies are debt units, like you said. What's the reset gonna? Where are we going to get to? And Jim Sinclair's brought this up in a recent interview. Other people have brought the IMF, Christine Lagarde. We're going to have a reset. We're going to have a debt reset, obviously. So, I guess they're just running up the cards to infinity because they're not going to pay them off. What does the debt reset look like?
The debt reset is going to unfold as a resource problem for the people. Once we cannot borrow anymore. Look, let's just back up a moment here. The European debt crisis, most of your listeners are old enough to remember that never went away. There is a full-blown debt crisis going on in Europe and right here in the United The crisis is if we don't continue to borrow and find ever more reasons to borrow cash into existence, the whole system will melt down. If that means do whatever they do to create this environment where they need to borrow or can borrow more and more until we just hit that darn wall. And when we admit that we're done, when we hit that moment of maximum saturation, what happens to the currency? What happens to the debt as a whole? It evaporates. When people put it into a perspective like that, for me, say, okay, maybe we're just going to say we're not paying the debt anymore. We just, the national debt, okay, we're not going to pay. What does that do? Being that we all understand that the currency, the dollars in your pocket, the euros that are in your pocket, whatever it might be, are connected directly to that unit of debt, they go up in smoke immediately. They're not worth anything anymore. They lose massive amounts of value. So there are some people, many, because I hear from them every day, that, hey, Greg, you know what, why don't we just not repay the debt? Why don't we just not pay it back? Well, what would that mean for your dollars? That means that your dollar now could buy 1/10 of what it was able to buy yesterday. That's the situation. That's why this becomes a resource problem. And that is, if we do end up in a global situation, debt is maxed out and it just evaporates, we will lose half the world's population in a short period of time. People will not stand idly and let themselves starve to death, let their children starve to death. They'll do whatever they have to do to survive. If that means they got to break into their neighbor's house to feed their kid that's screaming because they got hunger pangs, well, guess what? That's what's going to happen here. And this is what Ray Dalio, not Greg Mannarino anymore, is talking about when he says social unrest like we've never seen before. Rioting in the streets, Greg, that's what this looks like. When people throw these terms around as if they're just, oh, it's going to be a reset, they have no idea in the slightest what they're talking about, because they have no idea, again, how money works, how the system demands that this is the way it works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, we're going to face, Greg, you know it and I know it, a biblical moment that will be talked about here for thousands and thousands of years. What did we do? What did we allow to happen? We did this to ourselves. People doing this to themselves. It's so unbelievable, Greg, but it's the truth. I don't believe people have their best interest in mind. If they understand what's going on and what they're doing to themselves right now, what they're allowing our world leaders to do in this environment, they would be rioting the streets now, saying, what are you doing? Do you know the path that we are on is not sustainable? Do you know the path that we are on is going to correct to a fair value? And what does it mean for me? What does it mean for my family? No. Everybody thinks everything is going to be completely fine. Absolutely not. The world that we are in now will be unrecognizable in a very short period of time once we hit the reset or correction to fair value moment.
And I talked to a lot of important money players, and what I'm trying to do is, because I'm not a big money player. I mean, I'm just a guy who's the son of a machinist, but I want to see what they're doing. I want to see what they are doing. And a lot of big money people are buying gold and silver. And one of the things that just happened, which I was stunned, and I've been watching, I don't know anything about numismatic stuff, but I watch the bullion market just because it's just part of what I do. And I have never seen the Treasury, the Mint, the U.S. Mint, stop sales of silver eagles at the second month of the third quarter. What does that mean to you about, they're done, they're out. You'll get to 2019s in January. What does that mean to you in terms of demand? I think it means there's been a ton of people saying, can I have 50 monster boxes? Do you have 100? I'll take 100. I mean, that's got to be it, isn't it?
Greg, there's no doubt about it. This is something I've been speaking about for a long time. We've spoken about this as well. The paper market, paper derivative market, this is something that should be illegal in my view.
Well, it is.
It's not on the elemental chart. It doesn't exist. You got, even just this morning, we had a massive amount of silver onto the market. And it just slammed down the price of silver. It's not real, and there's no connection whatsoever between the actual demand and or supply left of physical silver, which is my favorite of them all. You know that, and gold, that to what is being reflected here in the paper market. When I tell people, and I say this every day, there is no price discovery mechanism. It's completely fake. So we are going to run it, and maybe we're seeing it now, a hardcore supply shortage, deliverable gold and silver. What we've talking about forever. There's going to be a moment when that becomes real as well. Look,
do you think we've hit that moment? Is that what do you think it sends the message? Just your gut reaction. I'm thinking to myself, I've never seen this ever. And I'm far from an expert, but I have, and all the time they produced in Silver Eagles, it's what, since 1986 or something, since the 80s. But I have never seen them stop. I've seen them stop in the middle of December and say, "Hey, we got to retool." And people and they wouldn't start till the middle of January. But the second month of the third quarter, we haven't got to the third month of the third quarter, and they're out. They're done. We're finished. Sorry. What does that tell you about? What does that say to you? What is your gut reaction to that?
It tells me that they're running into a supply issue. Physical silver I think, is going to become almost extinct at one particular time. Look, physical silver is used in especially right now where we are building up a military around the world. Militaries are being built up, missiles, smart weapons. All of these things use pounds. Each one missile, from what I understand, like an ICBM or something, that uses 60 pounds of silver. Off on this, maybe there's some military weapon experts out here, but this is what I've heard. So you would imagine with a military buildup around the world, because that's what we're getting geared up for, war, you would see the physical prices rising, but it's the paper market that seems to be dictating a fake market. It doesn't exist. It's not on the elemental chart. It's dictating the price for physical gold and silver. I'll say this. Right now, from what I understand, there are more short positions against gold and silver than we've ever had in history. That, to me, is a bullish sign. When too many people get on one side, it is absolutely time in a real market to look at the opposite side. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out, Greg. All I do know is they cannot allow assets like gold, like silver, and even currencies to compete against fiat currencies, especially against the dollar. Can't do it. They have this environment we're in is being engineered to do one thing: push cash into the stock market. Where can people put their cash right now? You cannot be in a bond. Why can't you be in a bond? Because you actually lose purchasing power by holding debt. Bonds are debt. 10 years, you're going to get paid nothing. In relation to inflation, you're actually losing cash, purchasing power. Same thing is happening with savings accounts here in the United States. You can't save money. You can't have it in a savings account because every day you are theoretically getting poorer. Where else are you going to be? I think you should be in physical silver and physical gold. You all know that. But most people are not going to go there. Most people are going to sit there and go, okay, well, what am I going to do? Well, I guess I should keep shoving cash into the stock market because there's nowhere else to go. And that's what's inflating this bubble that we're in right now. The stock market is in an epic bubble. And it's not just Greg Mannarino saying this. There's some pretty lofty people out there warning. Again, let's go back to Ray Dalio. He's warning a lot lately. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley came out. Forbes magazine ran a whole article on this. It's incredible. It really is. But people are ignoring it, Greg. The music stopped, but the people are still dancing. And unfortunately, when they realize the music is stopped is when this whole thing is going to become very, very real.
I tell people to get ready and stay ready. I mean, I know it's daunting. I've been telling them that for a couple of years because you don't know when somebody's going to zig and everything else is going to zag, and it's going to, as you say, get real. So get ready and stay ready. Is that the best advice we can give people?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. Realize that the music really has stopped. But people are still dancing here, and this is nothing new. We've seen this too. It's the same kind of thing. No one wants to leave the party. Everyone wants to stay there. But then when people realize that the party is ending, everyone rushes to the door at the same time, and not everybody can get out. So that's what I want people to do. That's what people should think about.
Greg Mannarino, thanks for talking to us about the news that's not getting out and how bad the emerging markets are, and the plug has been pulled and things are getting shaky from the periphery on the way into the U.S. It's coming here, right? It's coming to the U.S.
Well, it's going to hit the big markets like the big economies last, obviously, but that's probably more than likely why we're getting a media blackout. You can't see. If people don't see something, then it's not happening. So again, the illusion will be kept real until that moment where people say, whoa, what's going on here? Why were we fist-fed lies here for all these years? Why are we being told everything is so darn great when it's really not? It's an illusion that will become real.
Greg Mannarino, you are the founder of TradersChoice.net. Greg Mannarino, you can go on there. You have videos. You put out a market report a couple times a day, don't you?
Twice a day.
Twice a day. Dang, dude. I mean, you are on fire. I mean, they're not like 30 minutes, but you've been right a lot. You do your pre-market report on Sunday night, and you're right. I watch that stuff. You write a lot. You just write a lot. I mean, nobody's 100%, but I'm sure that people at CNBC and Fox Business are watching you, going, "Dang, I wish I could say that. He's right."
That's true, because I know some of those guys, and that is the fact.
So, okay. Greg Mannarino, TradersChoice.net. Thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you, Greg.